You're listening to the Coach Hodge and Bank Show on the Coaching Culture in Athletics Radio Broadcast Network. Sit back and enjoy the show. Please note, the views and opinions discussed in this podcast aren't necessarily the opinions of the host and or Coach Hodge and Bank Show on the Coaching and Culture Athletics Network.
Coaching Culture in Athletics is brought to you by the Mad Culture Present in Athletics, written by moi. Here we go. All right. So I'm gonna unmute Coach Swanson and Mr. Chris Duerr, if it'll unmute. It's not unmuting. That's weird. Chris, did you mute? Okay, there you are. All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody. CCA episode 15 tonight. It's amazing. CCA with Coach Banks, Coach Swanson tonight. Welcome one and all to a grand concocted show detailing the many concepts regarding culture and athletics. Tonight, folks, we dive into the culture from the sports broadcasting sector, and I'm super excited about it. Tonight, we have the one and only Chris Duerr, the sports broadcasting director from KHQA TV. A couple of questions to keep in mind here before we go. What defines a sporting culture? What is the current state of sports in our community? And how can we end the mad culture present in athletics? Mr. Chris Duerr, you know what? I'm man-crushing a little bit. I know Coach Swanson is. We're excited to have you on, man. Hey, welcome to CCA.
Well, I am super excited to be here with you. Honored by the invitation, gentlemen. And it is a pleasure to sit down with you both tonight. Two of my idols right here tonight to sit down and to have the evening with you. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, man, it's very exciting, to have you on. We've got a couple first-timers. They're coming to watch you, Chris, so it's exciting to have those folks in. If you have a question, feel free to type them out in chat, either on Spreaker or here on Facebook. Chris, let's start out a little bit. What got you involved in this thing called sports broadcasting?
Well, I was actually forced into sports broadcasting by a gentleman by the name of Tomasi Amatuwani, who was a 6'6", 340-pound parade All-American defensive tackle at Vista, California, in San Diego, who I was an offensive lineman. I was a pretty good one at a pretty good high school football program in California. In fact, we were, up until my senior year, the winningest high school football program in the nation by percentage. I mentioned up until my senior year because that's something that's still really painful to talk about, Chuck. We were a very disappointing. I believe we ended up finishing 6-2-1 my senior year. But this Tomasi Amatuwani fella as a right guard, my coach called I think he called it a 22 lead, which meant I, at 195 pounds, was supposed to blow out this 340-pound monster out of the hole all by my lonesome. And in so doing, I found myself firing out of my stance with a lot of enthusiasm, as you do as an offensive lineman. And then I found two really weird sensations. I found myself stopping instantly and being hurled backwards onto my tailback to be credited with the only tackle of my high school career. So I figured at that point, football was probably out and broadcasting was probably in. I've always loved sports, and this has been a way that, I've been able to stay with it, to stay inside of the culture, to add to the culture, which is an incredible honor, and to, especially within our community here in the tri-states, to kind of grow that fabric and to expand it and to make people understand that they're not just watching high school athletics or college athletics. They're watching our future, largely our future doctors and neighbors and leaders, and to be able to positively reinforce what it is they do is the great honor of my life's work.
Now, I have to say that Chris Duerr is much more than a sports broadcaster. He is a ball magnet, and I've seen that live, okay? I've seen that live.
Yeah, yes, you have. That was the second one this year. That was a baseball. I actually took a golf ball to the head at a cornferry.com tour this year on the golf tour. I was following Quincy native Luke Guthrie. I was walking up the sixth hole and took one right to the back of the noggin. So yeah, it's not been my year in terms of being able to stay safe out there in the field of play.
Well, it makes me think that you're probably going to have a special helmet, and you're not going to be able to use last year's NFL helmet, right?
Yes, that's definitely it. Apparently I don't get the $10 million if I walk away. So yeah, I'm pretty much stuck either way.
Coach Swanson, I know that you had an amazing question. I'm going to let you fire away first, buddy.
Oh, okay. Didn't expect to start with this, but we'll go with it,
Sure.
So Chris, I got a couple, but first, I'll just really simple before I get into the deeper stuff. Cover a lot of sports, a lot of athletes from, high school to college and whatnot. What sport do you enjoy covering the most? And what type of athletes do you see that have some of the similarities of, or some good traits you see between the athletes in the tri-states that make them good athletes?
Oh, sure thing. I pretty much in season enjoy everything that I do. And it's nice in my job because you never get bored, because just at the point where you think you've reached your zenith in covering football or basketball or baseball, the seasons flip around. So it is something that is new and different every single day. Part of that is, I have kind of a curious mind, and if I'm not engaged in a way that I'm doing something a little bit different every day, I think I'd get bored with the job. Here I am 25 years later. I don't really have boring days, and most days I still get up and I'm really excited about something I get to do that day. So, in that aspect, it's a dream job. It's been totally fun. And I think probably if you're asking me what my favorite thing is to do, it's obviously for me, football in the fall, because everything seems to, you have basketball every single night or baseball every single night. Mm-hmm. Everything in football builds to Friday and Saturday. And that sense of anticipation for the Friday night lights, and the weekly sort of storylines and narratives that you have a chance in my business to spend 4 or 5 days building up for people in their communities, because this isn't just a football game. It's a community pride event largely. And to have an ability to cultivate that and to spend a little bit of time introducing people to, the faceless players in the helmets that you don't see on the field, that's an incredible amount of fun. As far as the culture goes with our athletes, I do think you tend to see a lot of the same tenets that made the greatest generation great still alive in high school athletics. And we don't get that in a lot of places in our society anymore. But you can't cheat the games. This is the one place you can't go back and retake a game if you fail it, and that's sort of my hang up with the educational system these days is, there is no consequence. And when you're running a consequenceless society, people become entitled. This is something that's really cool with athletics, is that to this point, nobody's been able to lawyer their way or to cheat their way around the things that are part of adversity in life. You can't legislate adversity out of sports. And to me, I think athletes who go through that become better people, because some of the things that I've learned from sports being, in a different time, in a different era, is that when real life rears up on a random Tuesday and punches you in the mouth, whether it's, divorce or financial issues or, sickness or the death of a loved one, you got to keep going. I mean, you can't lay there in the fetal position and not respond to the punch. And for me, it was football that taught me that, hey, if you blow a play, if Tomasi Amatuwani throws you back onto your running back, there's another snap to do it. And until you stop taking snaps in this life, you're still playing to win. So I think you see that a lot. I think part of our culture is very neatly incubated by the fact that we have a lot of farm culture here. We have a lot of grassroots and blue collar culture in our region. And kids are of a certain toughness, and they're demanded a certain excellence. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when we sit down, we do a program called Student Athlete of the Week, that when we do that, the best athletes are invariably also the same students every single year that we do it. So, to me, that's been ingrained for the 12 years we've done the program, that's reinforced that the pursuit of excellence tends to extend in everybody's lives. And that's sort of what I love, Coach, about this particular arena in doing it in the Tri-States, is that you're getting a chance. I'm getting a front row ticket every week to see the future. And then, 20 years later or 10 years later, when you do this, you see these people and the adults they've become, and you're not surprised by their success because they were fostered and incubated in this culture that we've created.
Now, Chris, you've obviously been around this for a long time, as have I, in the coaching realm, administrative, whatever. When you look at the biggest culture positives and culture killers, and you've probably seen it over the years. I mean,
definitely.
What's the biggest culture killers that you've seen in your 25 years? And then change the ground a little bit. What's one of the biggest positives when we look at developing a positive culture in athletics?
Well, I think that's a pretty easy question, Chuck, and the fact that I think selfishness tends to be the biggest net negative for a culture anywhere. The best coaches, the best leaders, the best team leaders are the ones who can get people to think beyond themselves. And I'm not just talking about sports. I'm talking about my newsroom. I'm talking about, your school. I'm talking about anywhere you go where selfishness rules over the ability to get people to contribute to a greater goal. That kills cultures. And, the teams that are successful not just always because they have the most talent. It's not a coincidence that the same teams and the same coaches win big every single year. That's a function of those folks knowing better than anybody else how to get people to buy in. And that's not an easy thing, because especially when you're dealing with young kids, that's a really hard thing to see the concept beyond self. And especially in this day and age where we're stimulated by phones and first-person video games and things that make you feel like you're the center of the world and that the Copernican universe rotates around you, to be able to go out and get a young man or a young woman to say, hey, I maybe my role isn't to be the number one scorer. Maybe my role is to be a support player. Or my role is to be the best offensive lineman I can be. Or my role is to set the best possible pick I can set for the leading scorer on our team to go forward. That is a big element of maturity, personal maturity, because we do the same thing in our office places. If there's a grander goal, we all have to sacrifice to make that happen. So I do think that, selfishness and selflessness are both the biggest negative and net positive in the culture as we see it today. Sports are beyond that at this point.
Now, how do we get 100% stakeholder buy-in? Is it even possible, or is it
100% no. But what you hope you do is you hope you reach the people as coaches. And you see this. If you can play to the most important people in the room, the leaders, the kids that people naturally gravitate to identify the kids that have that natural charisma to be leaders, if you get those kids, other kids tend to follow along. And, I think it's elemental with young people that they tend to follow, either positively or negatively. And if you can win those hearts and minds, the ones that tend to draw, I think as coaches, everybody else falls into place, because nobody wants to be the outsider or the uncool kid. And if you're kind of in lockstep with the kids that draw that kind of attention, that have that kind of pulling power, I think that's what you do. I don't know that you ever achieve 100% buy-in, and I don't even think we always see that on the same teams. But what you hope is that after 4 years of ingrained stepping freshmen through seniors of getting there, that they become sort of less culture resistant. And maybe that's the key along the way. I think we all sometimes in life, our first thought is to default to selfishness. When I do that, my own personal life, I can still hear my, varsity offensive line coach, big fella by the name of Dave Morton, yelling in the back of my head, hey, Duerr, get with the plan. I mean, and I think we all need that in our life. I think we all need that voice that brings us back. And I think we all need to catch one across the chops, metaphorically speaking, every so often. Little adversity to remind us what's important and where we're at. And, it doesn't hurt me if something goes wrong or bad. I think that's a chance to improve. And I think that works for all of us. Even in this day and age, gosh, what am I, almost 40 years removed from high school.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. And when I look at the mad culture present in athletics, I'm talking about obviously the extremes. Where you have a parent or a coach or a player that's constantly bickering at the officials. You have a parent that's yelling at a coach. You have an administrator that may be pressuring a coach in those organizations. I think the most important thing is that we open up a dialogue where we can communicate. Is it even possible in today's day and age, Chris, to be able to communicate positively? Like lo and behold, if I have a different a concept on something than Coach Swanson, lo and behold, it's very important to be able to communicate your issues, right?
Well, it is, and we have become a culture that is stimulated by the idea of always being right, always winning personal arguments, and not having any reciprocity of back and forth. We want to have all the answers. We want the other side, whoever it may be, politically, religiously, coach versus player, the other side to be wrong. And we have been sort of stimulated in this age of social media to believe that we can only seek out that message which reinforces our thoughts. And you're right, that's tough, Chuck. I mean, there's a lot of that in play in culture. I'd still like to believe that the better nature of our angels, that the Fred, Mr. Rogers of the world, that sort of, get outside of yourself applies, and that people do and can still be in this day and age talked with and reasoned with. Now, you see instances where people bring attorneys into the issues, or school boards, or and this stuff you talked about, the mad culture. It's a legitimate, real thing. We've seen it play out over and over, time and time again. But I also like to think that there are still parents in this world who will tell you that if you don't like the way things are going, then quit. This is your decision. This is a you decision. I'm not going to, I'm not going to go and fight a coach who tells you you're not the best player. The coach is in charge, because in the real world, the boss is in charge, and you're not always going to be there as a parent to flip that around. I mean, those are the lessons we should be teaching our kids, not trying to litigate through school boards or through backbiting or bickering to administrations that coach isn't playing your kid. Coaches are pretty fair, and coaches' jobs are pretty much on the line. They're not playing kids or not playing kids out of spite. We try to reinforce that all the time. It's not personal. If your kid's not playing, he's not good enough. It's been generally axiomatic in the history of the sport, because coaches, for everything else, as a point of personal pride, are trying to win. They're trying to maximize what they get out of their team. It's their own rational self-interest in this case that's playing out. And if your kid's not playing, there's a reason. And that reason is like 99.9% of the time, not because they don't like your kid. It's because your kid's not comporting to what the culture is supposed to be.
Now, Coach Swanson, I do have to throw this out there. You grew up in the day and age when the helicopter parent showed up, okay? And then as you began your teaching career, the lawnmower parent showed up, and then now we have the snowplow parent. So parents, I'm not saying that I'm perfect, and I'm not saying that I was perfect, as a sports dad, because my daughter played Division II softball, whatever. I'm not perfect. But the biggest issue is we got to have these conversations. Coach Swanson, I know that you're chomping at the bit of asking another question, so I'm going to let you, buddy.
Oh yeah, what you're saying just is true, and it hits home from the coach's perspective, and you're speaking a lot of truth, which makes us all happy to hear. So you've traveled around, you've seen a lot of different teams live in action. What are some of the more horrific events that you've seen from parents or coaches or behaviors from players that you've noticed over the past couple of years?
Well, I'm pretty much a nerd a little bit, because my back is usually to the crowd, and I'm usually able not to see it. Now, I say that I would go as a spectator or a fan to like my nephew's games, and I would see people in the stands. And I think we, as not to the point of, I'm not advocating anybody get in a fist fight, but I think there's a way when you deal with people who are acting in a manner that's not conducive to a high school or even youth league game. I think there's a way to let people to know that they're not comporting themselves the right way without having to be totally confrontational. And usually if you shut people like that down, 50% of the time, 70% of the time, they're embarrassed by their actions and they come to realize it. Again, I'm not advocating anybody, throw hands with anybody, but I am saying that you confront behaviors that this is a kid's game. Come on. This is not this is, it's to the point where we have signs posted at baseball games. I saw one, my coworker, Tegan Orbit Hewlett, took her son to the Show Me State games down in Missouri. And there was a sign posted, hey, you're the parent. Here's your jobs as the parents. Here's your responsibilities. And they're all to clap quietly, to be a part of it. I know we all don't always do that. And we all get triggered by bad calls and whatever. But at some point, we have to remember our base humanity in all of this, that officials are human beings. They generally are there to do, out of the goodness of their heart, a job. And, to take that personally, I had a coach from the very start of my career in high school football who told me an official will never lose you a game. And if you ever do that, if you ever think that way, you're a loser. So be a winner. And don't blame anybody else. You take personal responsibility. I think we as parents need to learn that lesson as well, to take personal responsibility for our actions, because we're amplifying to younger people how people comport themselves at games. And like I said, to the most part, I'm glad I don't get to see that, because it's something that, it is disappointing when you go into a crowd and see people act a certain way. So there is some sanctity and some safety on the sidelines with your back turned to it, filming the action. As far as kids go, I tend to think I haven't really seen in person, other than the occasional, personal foul or whatnot, or somebody acting out in anger, anything horrifically bad in the last couple of years. Wrestling seems to, for some reason, people throwing their headgear, that type of thing bothers me. I understand the competitiveness of that sport, and I truly respect and love watching wrestling. But it seems to me, for the most part, that's some of the worst of what I've seen is kids throwing their helmets and acting out because coaches or parents don't take control of that instantly and reflect instantly that that's not an acceptable behavior. I mean, we all have bad moments, and I think we all at times would profit by being checked on them. Maybe in a quieter moment or a better moment, but I think those are all teachable and coachable moments for all of us in the way we should comport ourselves.
Coach Swanson, we had a little bit of dead air there. You okay?
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm just taking it all in. Chris, one thing I want to ask, and you've covered a lot of sports. I keep reiterating that because you do in multiple states. Is there a team that sticks out in your mind that you just covered one year that you just really enjoyed because they made like a Cinderella run, they just had a unique culture or chemistry that you enjoyed watching?
I think they're probably too countless to mention. I mean, there have been so many over the years. I'm always the stories that usually captivate me are communities that have been long suffering, that all of a sudden make their rise. The James gang at Keokuk, when Vandenberg and Hurt were there. We had a Hannibal team go to state, which had never happened. I'm still here to see a Quincy High team go to state in football because that hasn't happened. I think that's the one threshold we haven't seen. But, there's just been so many really good ones over the years that, and every team is its own unique story. And, to be in on the ground floor of that every year, again, I get to be the soundtrack to people's memories. People still pop in the 1997 Warsaw or the 1998 Nauvoo-Calusa state championship runs in basketball, those tapes. And it's, forever going to be, and they're going to show their grandkids this, and it's forever going to be my voice or Steve Luton's voice, not, narrating those stories for them. And that's really a cool, humbling thing. So I enjoy all of them, to be brutally honest with you. There's not a time that I've gone by and, haven't found something unique and interesting in each story. And that's my job. I mean, that's incumbent on me, because there are, on every team, as many kids as there are on the roster, there are stories there. And it's incumbent upon me to dig those up and to illustrate those for people, to give them a greater, understanding of the dynamics of what take place to make a championship or a state run possible. And, I think we see it in every turn. Usually every year there's somebody who's a surprise, a positive surprise. And those teams are the most fun to cover, because those communities, especially those long-suffering communities, I mean, you get a sense of it when, we saw it with Central League football a couple of years ago, where, Central League football suddenly got good and got on a run. So, and all of a sudden, a basketball community turns into a football community. That's super fun for me, because as somebody who is a steward to culture, that's what we're trying to elicit. We're trying to still, in this day and age, give communities a sense of self, and putting them on television is a reflection of not just the kids who play or the teams, but it's, again, a point of personal pride for those communities. And to be able to be at the front of that parade, as it were, is a pretty cool deal.
And to see Chris come in when I'm yelling at my hogs, which were the offensive line back then, Evan. And Chris is there, and I'm having them, I don't know, bear crawl around the barrels. Chris kind of liked that. I remember that.
It reminds me of back in the day. Although you had some kids who could flat bear crawl, that was not a skill set I ever possessed very well.
Well, it's pretty exciting, and we had an offensive line, guys, that I'd put up against any team that I've ever coached, including back in Centerville, guys. And I know you guys are going to boo, our big playoff runs twice over there. I know you're going to boo, but man, we had some hogs back then. It was pretty good.
Fun stuff, and never forget, offensive linemen make everything go.
Oh yeah,
ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth?
Now, how exciting was it to see Central Lee make the state baseball tournament this year?
Oh, super exciting and unexpected to some degree. I know the record was great, but you don't really know anything until with any enterprise until you kind of get outside of the comfort level of your own regular season schedule and see how you stack up. And for me, just as a personal point, I didn't get to take part in Fort Madison's state championship baseball run way back in the day. With Chris Ramirez, who has gone on to be an incredible coach in his own right, based on that. Yes, fantastic coach. I didn't get a chance to take part of this. So this was really the first state baseball run I've had in Iowa. And, baseball is very near and dear to my heart. There have been very few of those type runs. We've had a couple in Missouri with Canton and way back in the day with North Shelby. We've had fewer still in Illinois, although I did get to cover a championship in 2009 with Jacksonville Route. I really enjoy that because – you're outside, it's the spring, everybody kind of acts like it's a lesser season, but to be able to polish off those spring seasons with, or in this case, summer season with Central Lee, to be able to polish that off with a chance to stand on the grandest stage of all for those kids, it's just a fantastic moment. And that's one of those moments that you can't take away people from the rest of their lives. So, yeah, that was super fun. I had a great time watching Central Lee. It was a universally great group of kids. It seemed like that Central Lee team had really, really smart leaders among those seniors. And I don't think it's an accident that they got where they got. They weren't the most talented team to make their way to Des Moines, but they were certainly a team that seemed to have the most amount of scrappiness and the best chin of anybody. You throw on them, something happens to them, they always found a way to get back up. So I think that was the really endearing thing about that particular Central Lee team, Chuck.
Yeah. Now I have to ask you this question as well. What's it like to cover like lacrosse? Because we don't have lacrosse in Iowa.
Well, it's starting, and I'm going to try to figure that out this year because I haven't covered any lacrosse. So it's going to be a really interesting, embarrassing couple of years as I try to figure that out. Most sports I have pretty good working familiarity with from my own experiences. I don't know that I've ever played lacrosse or watched lacrosse. So, yeah, I'm probably going to mess it up for a couple of years before I get it right. But, hey, learning is part of the process for all of us. And when you stop learning and you stop growing, you become stagnant. And, even this deep into a career, I can't afford that because I'm sure there's another young buck along the way who would come up and take my gig. So I'll have to adapt, but that's part of life.
There's not going to be anybody as beautiful as you, Chris.
You are clearly losing your eyesight.
All right. Hey, but should we change the name of this show to Two Coaches with the Best Beards in the State?
I tell you what, those are some incredible growths. You fellas are doing it right. And I tell you, I've been impressed. I've been making the rounds for college football over the last week. There's some serious camp stashes and some fantastic beards going on right now. So it's a good time to have the growth working.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Always is.
Yes.
Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up because we have a little bit of time because I definitely want to go over some really interesting stories here pretty quick. But Chanel Fletcher is a good friend of mine, and she's up out of Wisconsin, and she makes the following statements, and we'll talk about it here a little bit. It's and this must have been earlier, Chris, when you were talking about the mad culture. It's not players I'm scared of for my son; it's the coaches. My son is very good at soccer and loves it. He is a high functioning autistic child. Now, here's our second one. We did soccer this spring, and he loved it. The coach we had was amazing with him and others on the team. Another mother in my autistic mother's group wasn't so lucky. I think the biggest issue, and is it okay if I start?
Absolutely.
Okay, yep. I think the biggest issue there when you look at a lot of kids with whether it's a learning disability, whether it's it's like the higher functioning autistic kids, whatever. And I taught special education when I first came up, and I've been around kids with Asperger's and autism and whatnot. I think the biggest issue is that the parent has to be willing to establish a positive relationship with that coach, and then in turn that coach isn't going to have the barriers up because far too often as a coach, there are times that we put our barriers up. I'm not going to lie to you, okay, and there are times that we're going to be short, but if we have those conversations before any of these things take place, we're going to be more open in turn. Guys, I'll let you have way there.
Totally agree on that front. I think coaching is a volume business at this level, and sometimes individual needs are need to be articulated ahead of time. And if coaches have a better understanding, and that's not a guarantee because not everybody, Chuck, has had your experiences with special needs students, but I do think it's important to find a coach on the staff that you can talk to, that you feel you can have a relationship as a parent, whether it's the head coach or an assistant coach, and just from the get start. Because coaches sometimes don't sense or haven't dealt with particularly interesting or different experiences in life, with dealing with different type of kids. They're used to seeing kids, in some cases, in boxes because that's part of the job, and they're looking to employ them certain ways. Sometimes you have to look at the personality of the kids you're coaching, or the makeup and the setup of who they are from a character standpoint, or who they are from a functioning standpoint in terms of their mental or physical, limits and attributes, and everybody has both, regardless of what your situation is. Everybody does. Sometimes you have to weigh those things out. And if you can make that, as Chuck said, that base level connection with a coach going in, that's not necessarily a guarantee that everything is going to go smoothly, but at least I think they would have the understanding. And I think coaches, when alerted to that, will understand that this is, for a highly functioning autistic kid to be really great at soccer is a really special bridge and window into, a way to feel good about themselves within a community. And as we all know, autism, at a base root level feels like a separation. To make that bridge is such a special, unique connection. And I hope your friend up in Wisconsin, I hope that for the sake of her son, that this becomes a really positive, wonderful thing, because his life will be so much more and better enriched by being able to be successful in soccer and feeling a part of the team, even if, as autism pulls and roots away from him, to that natural inclination to be part of the group. So that's a fantastic thing, and I hope it works out for the best. Again, coaches are human beings; they don't always understand the way things work, from the get start. So I would positively encourage your friend up in Wisconsin to reach out to coaches, to reach out to administration, and just try to foster the right level of access for everybody going in.
Yeah, I agree with you both completely. I think probably the biggest issue is that most coaches don't know how to handle kids with types of needs. A lot of coaches, they're thinking in the box about all things they have to get done, and they think about probably the team as a picture and not just mean the needs of every individual on their team. It's difficult. It can be incredibly stressful. And Chuck, like you were saying, coaches errors up pretty quickly. Once our parent meeting's over with, we're kind of like, okay, parent comes at us to talk about a player. Most of the time we get defensive because we think the parent's angry, and it just leads to a horrible communication. So I think sitting down with a coach that you can, relate to, or the head coaching staff in general, and express what your kids' needs are, because all kids have different needs, especially those who have those special needs, and find a way to make it enjoyable for them, and also some things that will benefit the kid, because you can't treat every kid the same. I mean, even the kids on our basketball team, we can't yell at certain kids. We can't do this because they respond differently. We have kids all over the place. So to know our kids and build those relationships, we'll know how to best handle them. Yeah.
And I totally agree. It's basically, not everybody's going to be put in the perfect situation. And it's my hope, it's my hope just to get the conversation going. So coaches will be more open, and, community members, parents, this, that, and the other. I think that's extremely important. Now, about 10 minutes left here, Chris. What is some of your most exciting stories that you've ever done in your entire career?
Oh, I think, from a standpoint of just being able to tell stories and get people interested in storylines or in young people, I think without fail, I think they all kind of fall into that. For me, I'm at the point in my career where the most exciting thing for me is, knowing that sports, I have sort of a distance that I keep with sports just to know that it is sports and I love it and I'm passionate about it. But I also know that this is a tool that we're using to better our young people for their next walk. And to see them become, Chuck, outstanding parents, see them become successful in their next realm of life. There's so many kids that I've now covered over the years who've gone on now to become coaches. I'm at that point in my career. And to see them succeed and excel at that level, continuing our culture by helping young people and, not just taking the lessons that they learned, but transforming them in a more modern way. I had a coach that talked about this the other day when he was talking about coaching. Don't coach the way you were coached. Coach how you are, and become that new age person that, pulls your experiences, good from negative when they were younger, because coaches evolve and we all evolve and the sports have evolved. To do that and to become the best version of yourself rather than some carbon copy of some coach you had back in the day. I mean, we all know how much sports have changed over the course of the years with contact in football, with the way basketball practices are run now. It's not 3 hours and run kids into the ground. It's, hey, let's get the work done that we need to get done and get moving forward, because we know there's a lot of command on your legs. So I like to see the evolution too within sports. And I think it's been so positive within our society for not just the way we coach kids, but the way we accept kids. There's a greater level of acceptance of all different type of kids in our society, which is a good thing. Now incorporate that into your coaching. Incorporate ways to keep it fun, because I think at some level, that's the biggest challenge of coaching in this day and age. When kids are bombarded by easy entertainment, easy stimulus, how do you get them to continue to sacrifice of themselves and go outside and do something physically active and hard and demanding that could end up in you feeling, not great about yourself if you lose on a Friday night? How do you continue to do this with kids when Fortnite is the enemy or Fortnite is the other side, just something like that. So I think coaches have had to evolve, and I'm very positively encouraged by what I see with the way coaches have now reached out to kids and how they engage them differently, and how there's a lot more, there's a lot more college to it. With football, there's less contact, so we're not risking kids all the time, and we've learned how to tackle better. And, in the sport of football, I don't know that it's ever been as safe as it's been right now, because we're not being idiots like when I was in high school. We used to have stripes on our helmets, and, the less stripes you had on your helmet as an offensive lineman, the more that was ripped up, the more that was a badge of honor. Well, I was leading with my neck half the time like an idiot, and nobody was there to tell me any differently. So, I think in a lot of ways we've evolved for the better, and, especially within coaching, that we're teaching the right things, we're doing the right things. And at the end of the day, state championships and great runs are all fantastic and all, but I just love seeing kids being made better by sport. If it's within a 20-win season or a 4-win season, the kids that come out of that with a positive experience and become better people for it, those are my favorite stories. It's really not the wins and losses anymore for me. It's more about how many weddings am I going to be invited to? That's coming up. That's awesome. It's what a great, awesome standard. Yeah, well, it's it didn't start that way. When I first started in football, I was the old school guy, the guru that had to coach a certain way because that's how that was the expectations of the coaching staff, this, that, and the other. And then I evolved probably into more of a player's coach. My favorite NFL coach of all time was Dick Vermeil because he loved his players. Now, he would practice them to the point of no return, but he loved his players. Well, and I think you have to. If you're not loving your players, Coach Swanson, you can talk this better than anybody. If you don't love your players, why are you in this anymore?
Oh, I agree. I mean, if you don't want to be around the kids, then why coach? The best part of my day is getting to be around the kids, and that's during the summer, that's during the season. They're unique individuals, and I think John Wooden put it best, and he has this really long quote, but he always talked about how, the players that you have now are going to be, preachers, farmers, construction workers, senators, doctors. and you're helping them get there. You're helping them become the men that they need to be successful. And that's the best part of the job, is just being around the kids. Yes, as coaches, we like to win, but being around the kids is what makes the job so great.
Well, and selfishly for you, it keeps you young. I mean,
it really does.
Kids today are super smart. They're incredibly funny. I mean, and with my engagements, and I'm there, I'm in your community maybe once, a month personally, but to do an interview or whatever community is, because I'm bouncing around between 60 cities and high schools. But when I'm there, it's just fun to strike up, even for a brief moment, a bond with these kids, because they're so incredibly whip smart. Some of them are so incredibly funny and charismatic, and you just feel better about, I work in the news business. The first 20 minutes of what I do is the negatives that are, transponded out there and broadcast to the world about what young people do. And I feel like the 3 minutes I get at 6 and the 5 minutes I get at 10 are redemptive, because I get to remind people who are sitting out there on their porches that, hey, all these things you heard in the first 10 minutes of the news aren't necessarily an accurate portrayal of who young people are today. And if you get out and get to know them, there's some really great people, not just young people, really great people out there, participating in high school and college athletics.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Now we're down to our last 4 minutes and 20 seconds here, Chris. What do you want to see in your local communities to basically improve the culture? What do you see from the outside looking in? And obviously there's no such thing as a quick fix, but what do you see that we need to work on?
Well, first of all, I think engagement with the communities. I'd like to see more communities get avid and excited about high school sports. And we've seen a bit of apathy creep in with that over the years from a historic standpoint. So got to be a way to re-engage people to their fan bases and get more people in the gyms and in the stands and at wrestling meets and at the Diamond, and not just when it's great, not just when like teams are going on runs, but when, those are your kids that are going to be your neighbors and your leaders in your community. Support them, because your act of support, even if it's showing up for one game, it is big to them. It matters because you can feel what's in a gym. As far as with the culture, I think, again, we all need to start acting to the better angels of our nature in terms of how we treat people. Instead of looking at them as, us and them, more us, less them, in every way possible. And I think that's part of what will, bring us better together as communities. And if sports is the bridge that can do that, we've seen that so many times over the course of our history. And we're at a really divided time in our society right now. Maybe there's an Olympic team that brings us all together as Americans, and we stop looking at right, left, black, white, gay, straight, all of these things, and become the people that we're supposed to be, neighbors.
Absolutely. Chris, I don't want to make your head swell, but I'm going to tell you something. As a coach, as a former athletic administrator, as a teacher, as a parent, as a, whatever, I want to say how much I appreciate you being you. And when you come into communities, man, you have the best interest at heart, and you're the biggest fan everywhere you go. And just know that you have the biggest fans right behind you.
Well, bless your heart, and thank you for saying so. I've got the easiest and best job in the world, so it's really easy. And to get to deal with gentlemen like both of you, to get to deal with your kids, to deal with your communities, and to get that kind of chance to engage with people. I mean, that's all, we only have a finite amount of time on this earth. And the more people you engage with, the more friends you walk away with, the bigger the winner you are in this life. So I feel incredibly blessed where I'm at. God knows how the good Lord put me here way back in 1995, because I never would have thought that coming growing up in Sacramento, California. But being here now has been my life's blessing, and I wouldn't trade it for anywhere. And there's not a job I would accept over this one.
Yeah, and I go ahead, buddy.
Sorry, just real quick, Sacramento. Are the Kings making the playoffs this year?
The Kings are indeed making the playoffs. I've got them a 5 seed, but I'm a ridiculous optimist. So,
a 5 seed. Oh, dang.
Fingers are crossed. They're at least fun to watch now.
That's awesome. Now, again, we're about 60 seconds. Be sure to stay on the line as I end it here, Chris. Again, thank you very much for coming on, CCA. I do want to throw out a couple of things here. If you like what we're doing, be sure to follow us, share us, follow the pages, all that sort of stuff. And you know what? I'm going to ask Chris to come on again here down the road. So he's been an amazing guest. Awesome. This Wednesday night, folks, we have a special CCA. It's going to take place at 10 p.m. Central, 11 p.m. Eastern. Scott Jones, and he's a track coach out of Oregon. We're going to be talking about culture and also, the ability to get through, a lot of these things when we look at track. Next Sunday night, we have our very first female head coach, Alexis Kazarich, and then we're going to follow again on the 25th with another female head coach out of a 6A volleyball school out of Texas, Coach K. Riggs. For everybody on CCA, have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you soon.